a 26% cut to the very agency responsible for tracking illegal guns and supporting local police was never going to slip by quietly. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives may not grab headlines every day, but its work is at the center of battles against trafficking networks that fuel both organized crime and everyday violence. When Representative Rosa DeLauro confronted Pam Bondi in a tense hearing, the exchange quickly escalated into one of the sharpest debates over law enforcement priorities seen in years. What started as questions about numbers became a larger fight over whether protecting communities is being sacrificed for political theater. DeLauro wasted no time.
I am a career prosecutor, and I believe in keeping America safe, making America safe. First, what we're doing is ATF is going to be brought over with DEA. Everyone knows, everyone sitting up here, guns and drugs go together. They go together. We're going to make it more efficient. What I will tell you will not be happening is ATF agents will not be knocking on the doors of legal gun owners in the middle of the night asking them about their guns. They're going to be out on the streets. If I can finish, they're going to be out on the streets.
I have three
No,
minutes.
you asked me a question.
I did, and
you asked me a question,
and you haven't
I'm gonna
answered
answer
my
it.
question.
So they're going to be out on the streets working
You haven't
hand in hand
answered my
with
question.
DEA
You
to
haven't
violate.
answered. Mr. Chairman, I'd like an answer to my question. And the question is not being answered. How many ATF law enforcement officers and industry operations investigators do you anticipate will be lost to attrition as a result of the funding reduction you are proposing? You are proposing a 26% cut to ATF for fiscal year 2026, as well as a 4.4% cut to DEA. So you're going to merge the two agencies together, and then you're going to shortchange their resources, so neither one of them will be able to do the job that they have been designed to do. You've got a 34% cut to the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program, no dedicated money at all for the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. So, my view, it's fair to say that the Trump administration proposal shortchanges federal efforts to stop illegal gun trafficking and federal efforts to stop the flow of dangerous illegal drugs like fentanyl.
As I was attempting to answer your question very calmly, unlike you,
excuse me, Madam Attorney General. Answer yes or no. Tell me what the numbers are. I don't want to hear all of your filibuster about this. Go ahead, please. Tell us the numbers.
So we are reorganizing. ATF agents want to be out on the street.
Okay,
working
let me
with
answer the
DEA
question
agents.
for you. I'm going to answer it for you. Page. Mr. Chairman, you give me a certain amount of time, and I have a high respect for you, but I don't have to listen, nor do my colleagues have to listen to a filibuster when it's a simple question. But I have an answer to your question. It's page 146 of the department's fiscal year 2026 budget, and the performance summary explicitly says, and let me quote, ATF will eliminate 541 industry operation investigators, reducing ATF's capacity to regulate the firearms and explosive industries by approximately 40% in fiscal year 2026. ATF will perform fewer regulatory inspections. And the department summary goes on to say, and let me quote, ATF anticipates a reduction of approximately 284 support personnel and 186 agents based on historical attrition patterns, and these personnel cuts will impact ATF across various functions, unquote. If the capacity to regulate firearms industry is reduced by 40%, if you are losing 186 ATF law enforcement agents, on top of that, it is clear the direction you are headed with this budget, and that's what it is, isn't it? The proposal will weaken our ability to stop gun trafficking, and it will greatly reduce ATF support for state and local law enforcement that helps them prevent and solve violent crimes. It's a bad proposal.
Do you want to hear my answer in 3 seconds? You mentioned regulatory functions. We will not be having ATF agents go to the doors of gun owners in the middle of the night asking them about their guns, period. They will be out on the streets with DEA, guns and drugs.
How many are gone?
It will be attrition. We are not firing agents. They will be working
How
with
many have
DEA.
taken attrition?
Can I tell you that they all want to be on the streets? They want to be doing their jobs. They want to be
But you're getting them
guns.
off the streets.
They want
You're getting
to.
them
We're
off the
putting
streets.
them on the
And-
streets.
and
They want to be working with DEA.
You are getting them off
We
the
will be
streets. There is no
efficient.
clear. And Mr.
We will
Chairman,
be
I yield.
She cited the numbers. Fentanyl seizures down 30%, ATF facing a proposed budget cut of 26%, and DEA facing a reduction as well. Her tone was clear, sharp, and relentless. She asked how many agents, investigators, and support staff would be lost to attrition under this proposal. Bondi did not provide a number. Instead, she shifted, claiming the agencies would be merged, insisting that guns and drugs go together, and promising agents would be on the streets. To DeLauro, this was spin, an attempt to dress up cuts in the language of efficiency. To anyone watching, it was obvious she wanted a straightforward answer that never came. The real story emerged not through Bondi's words, but in the fine print of the budget itself. Buried deep in the performance summary were the hard figures. 541 investigators eliminated, reducing ATF's regulatory capacity by nearly 40%. 186 agents gone, plus 284 support personnel. Nearly 1,000 positions vanished at a time when traffickers are becoming more sophisticated and communities are already stretched thin. The paper trail told a very different story from the promises of efficiency and reform. Cuts of this magnitude do more than trim fat. They strike at the heart of enforcement. Fewer investigators mean fewer inspections of firearms dealers and manufacturers. Fewer agents mean fewer cases pursued against traffickers. Fewer support staff means slower coordination with state and local partners. When you shrink capacity by 40%, you don't streamline, you cripple. DeLauro zeroed in on this point, refusing to let vague assurances distract from the cold math that showed an agency gutted at the precise moment when the flow of weapons across state lines remains one of the most urgent public safety challenges. The tone of the hearing shifted as DeLauro pressed harder. Yes or no, she demanded. How many officers will be lost? Bondi tried to move around the question, repeating that agents would not be knocking on the doors of lawful gun owners, but would instead be on the streets. The back and forth grew heated. DeLauro accused her of filibustering. Bondi claimed she was answering calmly, while DeLauro grew frustrated at the evasions. What the audience saw was not just two officials disagreeing over numbers, but a fundamental clash of worldviews. One focused on preserving tools for enforcement, the other on selling a vision of reform that, in practice, left agencies hollow. Numbers have a way of cutting through rhetoric. When DeLauro read directly from page 146 of the budget summary, the magnitude of the cuts became undeniable. 541 industry operations investigators gone. That's nearly half of the capacity to regulate the firearms industry. 186 agents lost to attrition. 284 support staff reduced. These were not hypotheticals. These were not potential efficiencies. They were spelled out in black and white, a dismantling of the agency written into the very proposal under debate. What does that look like on the ground? Imagine fewer inspections of firearms dealers who may already be skirting regulations. Imagine investigators stretched so thin they can't follow up on tips. Imagine traffickers exploiting gaps left by an agency unable to keep up. Local police, already overwhelmed by rising violence, would lose federal support at the very moment they need it most. It's not just about statistics. It's about whether cases are pursued, whether illegal weapons are intercepted, and whether communities feel the presence of law enforcement or its absence. Bondi framed the cuts as a way to avoid harassment of lawful gun owners, insisting agents would be on the streets. But what she didn't address was the simple fact that with fewer agents, fewer investigators, and fewer staff, there are simply not enough bodies to be on those streets. The promise rang hollow when paired with the reality of nearly 1,000 fewer personnel. Efficiency may sound appealing in theory, but efficiency doesn't chase traffickers down highways, doesn't inspect shady dealers, and doesn't coordinate with police on the front lines. People do, and those people are being cut. The merger argument raised another problem. ATF and DEA may both confront organized crime, but their missions are distinct. One regulates firearms, explosives, and alcohol and tobacco industries. The other focuses on narcotics trafficking. Merging agencies under the banner of efficiency while cutting both budgets simultaneously risks weakening both. It is one thing to argue for better coordination. It is another to strip resources and then claim coordination will fill the gap. As DeLauro pointed out, this wasn't reform. It was a shell game that left both gun and drug enforcement weakened. The exchange grew more heated as DeLauro pushed for clarity. She accused Bondi of failing to answer a simple question. Bondi countered that she was being calm and respectful. The tension reflected something deeper than personal style. It reflected the frustration of lawmakers who see numbers that point to diminished safety while hearing rhetoric that pretends the opposite. In that clash, the stakes of the debate became clear, not just whether one budget proposal would pass, but whether enforcement itself would be taken seriously or treated as a bargaining chip. The political framing of cuts as fiscal responsibility or reform hides the real cost. In practice, it means fewer traffickers caught, fewer cases brought to court, and fewer protections for communities. Organized crime does not slow down because a budget is cut. Traffickers do not pause their operations to give agencies time to reorganize. They move faster, filling the gaps left behind. Cutting resources doesn't make the streets safer. It makes them more vulnerable. That is the contradiction DeLauro sought to expose, and it's why the clash resonated far beyond the committee room. Consider the broader context. Fentanyl seizures were already down 30%, raising concerns about enforcement gaps. Cutting DEA's budget by 4% and ATF's by 26% simultaneously sends a dangerous signal that resources are being withdrawn just as the need grows. Every community across the country grappling with gun violence or drug trafficking would feel the ripple effects of such reductions. The debate wasn't just about Washington numbers. It was about lives on the ground. When DeLauro read directly from the budget summary, the conversation shifted decisively. The evidence showed not just minor adjustments, but massive reductions. 40% less capacity to regulate firearms. Hundreds fewer agents. Hundreds fewer support staff. These figures turned abstract talk of efficiency into a tangible weakening of enforcement. DeLauro's voice carried the frustration of someone who saw through political theater to the real consequences awaiting communities if the cuts were enacted. Bondi's insistence that agents would be on the streets ignored the basic reality that with fewer agents, fewer would be anywhere. Promising presence without providing personnel is an illusion. Promising efficiency while eliminating the very people who do the work is a contradiction. The clash highlighted how political talking points can obscure reality, but numbers and lived consequences eventually cut through. This debate was never just about bureaucracy. It was about whether political leaders would prioritize ideology over safety. It was about whether efficiency would be used as a cover to weaken enforcement. It was about whether the public could trust that agencies tasked with fighting traffickers had the tools they needed. DeLauro's questioning cut to that core, refusing to let evasions or rhetoric replace accountability. Her persistence exposed the gulf between the promise of reform and the reality of diminished enforcement. The proposed cuts also raised questions about the future of coordination with state and local law enforcement. ATF and DEA provide crucial support, from sharing intelligence to backing up investigations. Reducing their capacity means leaving local agencies to shoulder more responsibility with fewer resources. It means shifting the burden onto departments already stretched, already struggling with staffing, already facing rising challenges. The promise of reform does not ease that burden. Only resources and personnel can. Numbers tell a story. 541 investigators gone. 186 agents lost. 284 support staff eliminated. 40% less regulatory capacity. Each number represents cases not pursued, inspections not conducted, traffickers not caught, coordination not provided. Each number represents a gap where enforcement once stood. Each number is a signal to traffickers that oversight is weaker, that opportunities are greater, that risks are lower. Cuts of this scale don't just weaken agencies. They embolden adversaries. The fiery clash between DeLauro and Bondi put that reality on full display. One side insisted efficiency justified cuts. The other demanded accountability for the real-world consequences. Watching the exchange, the public saw more than political theater. They saw a window into how decisions in Washington can reshape safety in neighborhoods across the country. They saw how rhetoric about reform can mask dismantling of enforcement. And they saw how pressing for answers can expose contradictions that otherwise remain hidden. In the end, the question is not whether agencies can be made more efficient. The question is whether efficiency is being used as a smokescreen for weakening enforcement. The question is whether political theater is being prioritized over safety. The question is whether communities will be left more vulnerable while leaders claim progress. DeLauro's persistence forced those questions into the open. Bondi's evasions highlighted how difficult it is to defend cuts when the numbers themselves reveal the truth. The implications stretch far beyond one hearing. If these cuts move forward, the ATF will be crippled. Gun trafficking will become harder to track. Organized crime will gain ground. Local police will face rising challenges without federal support. Communities will be less safe, not more. And the promise of reform will reveal itself as little more than a cover for dismantling. That is the real cost of this proposal. That is the reality hidden beneath talk of efficiency. As the hearing closed, the frustration was palpable. DeLauro had asked simple questions. The answers, when forced into the open, revealed a bleak picture. Efficiency had been exposed as sabotage. Reform had been revealed as retreat. And the clash had made clear that the stakes were not abstract. They were measured in lives, in cases, in communities. That is why this debate matters. That is why the confrontation resonated. And that is why the fight over these cuts is not just about budgets. It is about whether the country chooses to protect its people or weaken its defenses in the name of politics. So what do you think? Are cuts like these a sign of reform, or are they a dangerous retreat that leaves communities exposed? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because the next story takes this debate even further, into territory even more controversial than what you've just heard. Stay tuned.